Okay, going live. Okay, we are live. Hello, everyone. This is Nick, and this is Postgres TV episode 8 of season 1. And my co-host is Ilya. Hello, Ilya.
Hi, everyone.
We have interesting guest today, Michael Christofides. Hello, Michael.
Hi.
Yeah, Michael is creator of pgMustard.com, which is the tool which allows everyone to visualize.
Add some spiciness to the PostgreSQL SQL queries.
Yeah, to actually explain plans. So this tool allows you to get useful insights from explained plan Postgres provides, and to make life easier for those who want to optimize their SQL queries, right? Am I right?
Perfect.
Yes. Okay, good. We will talk about various Postgres questions, but mostly oriented on optimization topic, of course, right? So first of all, I would like to provide several announcements, actually not announcements, like recent news about online conferences. First of all, like I don't remember if you noticed, if we talked about it, but PGCon 2020 finally published all video recordings, and it's very, very interesting material. So go to YouTube, type PGCon, and you will find very interesting talks. Like I still watching them. I have it everything downloaded to my iPhone, so when I fly, I have something to watch except movies. So I recommend everyone doing the same. Also, recently we had FOSDEM, and we had very, very good Postgres track there. We talked about it last time with Andreas Scherbaum.
But we talked before it was
yeah,
happening, yeah. And actually, the conference was impressively good.
Yeah. So unexpectedly, conference happened online, and as I understand, like every material is published on website. It's not in YouTube yet, but you can.
But at some point they would be there.
Yeah, it's not that convenient.
Faster with that, but maybe they are just under pressure because it was like new format and things like this.
Right, so it's not that convenient than watching on YouTube, but it's like I guess the whole conference is about open source software. Everything was created using open source, so you can watch videos on the website, a lot of interesting stuff as well, and of course slide decks published as well. But it's not we also had pgconf RU online version this week. Monday through Wednesday, actually finished only yesterday. I almost said we had good Postgres track on that conference, but it was Postgres
yes,
conference.
Because it was commercial conference with commercial tracks as well.
Right. Postgres. It was organized by Postgres Pro, but only at last minute I realized
that it was organized by Highload, actually.
Why I'm receiving updates as it was a Highload conference, because I'm a member of program committee of Highload, and I was receiving some weird updates. But it turned out that they joined efforts. So Highload organizers joined efforts with Postgres Pro and pgconf.ru.
Staging and the testing.
Right. So Highload has very, very good technology behind everything. So, but they don't like actually. I can tell it. They don't like online format. They tried it a lot, but didn't like it. But as I understand, pgconf.online or .ru, as you wish, it looked very good, right? As I've heard, I participated, made 2 talks, a talk plus training, but I didn't watch anything else, unfortunately, so far. But I've heard it was it got very good comments and feedback. So videos are not published yet, but slide decks are published, and videos are promised to be published in a few weeks. So we have a lot of interesting online events happening. So I encourage everyone to watch good materials. of course, including PostgreSQL, which is not often as often as we wish, but
Partially
happening,
because
right?
of all this stuff, yeah. But
Every-
let's go to our today's topic. Or
right.
you
So,
have more
Michael,
announcements to do.
yeah, that's it. I promise.
Yeah.
Michael, let us know how you started with Postgres and maybe actually with databases, because I know you have more experience than just Postgres, right?
Yes. Hi. So yeah, I think it's probably probably worth me going back to, I think 2010. I came out of uni and my first job pretty much was at a database tools company called Redgate, who at the time pretty much only did SQL Server tools, and worked on a bunch of those, not as a developer, but everything from sales to project management to product management. So that was my real introduction to databases. I worked there for 5 years. Started in the SQL Server tools part of it, but ended up working on the Oracle tools quite a lot. We ported a few of the products to work for Oracle, and even as a little kind of side project for a couple of people, the MySQL tools, and I was involved in that a little bit as well, but never any Postgres tools.
But so Redgate is primarily a SQL Server tools developer, right? I also know that they recently acquired Flyway, right? It's like even more maybe known thing than Redgate other tools. I'm just guessing, I'm not sure, but Flyway is very popular right these days. So they now are also developing that tool as well,
yes.
Right? Okay.
Yes, exactly.
But so no Postgres, you said, right?
No, and a few of us in the Oracle team. The company was massive and the Oracle team was tiny, but a few of us saw Postgres coming. This was 2010 to 2015, so kind of a few years ago. And obviously, Postgres' history is huge and long, but this kind of, it feels like a recent-ish resurgence or like a recent-ish trend. And it seemed obvious to us at the time that a bunch of customers, even then, were at least doing new projects on Postgres. So even if they were largely an Oracle shop or a SQL Server shop, they were seriously considering Postgres or actively using it for new projects. So a few of us were keen to do Postgres tools, but we were never able to persuade people. But the next company I worked at was a payments startup in London, and they use Postgres as their backend. And talking to the developers there and the infrastructure guys there, they loved it. So that was my first kind of hands-on experience with talking to people and being able to ask them why they chose it and be able to really see it in action.
Right. So interesting. Like Postgres, especially for those who came from commercial databases world, it's often criticized by lack of having good tools, good graphical interface tools, right? So did you have like ideas like you have some gap to fill here, or like right?
Yeah,
Like,
good question. So sorry. Go cardless. People did. It was a kind of, everyone was on Macs, and people did use Postico, which is one of the more intuitive interfaces for Postgres.
For macOS only, as I remember, right?
Yes.
For macOS users.
Yes, exactly. So I didn't at first. I don't think I really fully appreciated, things like the reaction to pgAdmin, especially the move from 3 to 4. How a lot of people there were using pSQL, but I didn't see that. So at first I didn't appreciate the kind of the GUI need, but at Redgate, that was kind of what they were famous for. Their slogan was ingeniously simple software at the time. I don't think it still is, but like that was their kind of tagline. So I definitely had experience with making tools as simple as possible and working for a company that valued that. So talking to people, I got attracted to Postgres as a platform. I really like the ecosystem. I love how extensible it is. It also seemed really difficult to disrupt. Like now, once it's on a roll, it's going to be really difficult for the other, the other providers to keep up, I think. So it seemed like a really good bet for the long term, and it also seemed like we could extend it, and it was really attractive from a point of view of being able to see the source code and actually contribute back to things as well. As well as the fact we saw the community seemed really supportive. It seemed super open, lots of people willing to help each other out. So it was quite attractive from it seemed like a community we'd like to be involved in. But our first few ideas, so we basically got attracted to Postgres and then looked for a problem, if that makes sense. So yeah,
definitely,
yeah. So a bunch of my first ideas were, what does Redgate do? And could we do that for Postgres? But my favorite products there were integrated into Management Studio. And there was because there isn't a UI that everybody uses, and definitely not one that's extensible, that was tricky. So a load of my first few ideas people didn't like, or people were kind to me and they said, oh yeah, that sounds good, but no one was excited about it. But a lot of them talked about, when I asked them what they did spend their time on, it was never anybody's number one, but loads of people use a tool for visualizing query plans. And when I looked at them,
like Depeche, explaindepeche.com, right? Like explaindepeche.com and
yes,
Now.
Yes, well, at the time it was Tatiant's. Alex Tatiant's have built PEV, version 1.
First version.
So, yes. And it's great. And I think I spoke to him and he threw it together in a few weeks over a Christmas break and then basically didn't change it for years. And it was great and people loved it. But when I looked at it as somebody new to it, and when I looked at people helping each other online, it still took a long time for me to work out what was going on. It still, especially as the query plans got long, it was really, I found it difficult, even once I got familiar with them, to quickly work out what was going on. So yeah, it felt like there was a starting point there, but we could definitely help people more with what to do next. If that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. So you decided to build something new, and which is easier for who? Like for whom? For experts or for people who are just starting with Postgres? Who is the main?
Yeah, good question.
Target audience.
So most of the people I could speak, most people I have, friends and people that used it were you'd probably, if you do it on like an axis from developers to DBAs, they were much more on the developer side of things. They have to know a lot about the whole stack. So it was easier to design for them at first. And I think they're people that would benefit more from some of the tips on what to do next. But the more we looked into it, we couldn't really separate the tips from the visualization. The actual giving people a quick idea of what was going on seemed to benefit experts just as much. So for the experts, it wasn't so much what to do next, but how quickly can you spot the bottleneck? How quickly can you, especially when the plan's complex, so especially when you're starting to get into the big query plans. So that is a slightly different benefit that they cared about, but it seemed to be, it seems to be a mix of both, which is it's not normal, I guess.
Yeah, we have some technical issues with your video, but sounds is good. Like we understand what you're saying. So I think we're good.
Oh, sorry.
It happens. No, it's fine. It's fine. So okay, it makes sense. But if we step back before we talk more about pgMustard, like what do you think? What are the main difficulties about optimizing a single query? If we talk about we have explain command and with various options in Postgres, what are the main difficulties to people? I'm sure you made some research and you continue making it, right? I guess. So what do you think are the main challenges for those who use
start
explain?
using explain, I guess.
Yeah, we know that sorry. We know there are various talks like explain, and so on. Like usually these talks are very long because a lot of stuff to explain in explain command. But what are the main challenges in your opinion?
Yeah, I would love to hear your two views on this as well. You probably see it from a very different angle than I have, and for more years. Kind of I think the trick with, sorry.
Yeah. If you want me to start thinking about like brainstorming, what is the main problem is like for me the main problem is there is no good documentation like kind of user guide type how to use it, right? You need to be already an expert to effectively use it, right? Because it's and all visualizations which exist, even so far, I see like there's no perfect one. There are many interesting ideas in each one, but also there are many ideas which distract you from the main task of optimizing. Like we try to visualize just to make it look better, but not oriented to solving problems. This is what I usually saw observed in pgAdmin, and actually it's the type of visualization a pgAdmin has. It's also can be met in other database systems. But what I liked there, it's like the size of connections shows you. I guess how much time. I'm also not sure. So like. I usually used only text version most of the time because I got used to it. But you need to be an expert to use it in an effective way. So this is the main thing: no lack of good documentation and how-tos, user guides.
Yeah,
right.
I think that's great, and I do think that the Postgres, the official documentation, it has a couple of really good things on explain, but it does have a using explain section, which is worth reading. Like most of the Postgres docs, if people read the section that they were interested in, it would give them a really good starting point. But you're right that each of the terms that you can come across aren't documented in there, and having flashbacks to
actually. At this point, I'm talking about this and in parallel trying to find. I know that you created like explain glossary recently, right? I'm going to share my screen and show you and show everyone this.
Yeah,
I think
it's
very good stuff. So on your website, pgMustard, you have explain glossary. So you try to document each node in explain plan, right? And this is like it's not what I mean, like because I mean mostly like user guides how to address various problems, but this is more like glossary type of documentation, like reference, right? Reference type. So you have like index, inverted index, right? you need to find your word, and then you can read, for example, a bitmap, or you can read some short article about it, trying to understand how it works. It's also very, very useful, but like still I think there's a big potential of creating user guides. This is my number one problem about explain. What do you think?
There's a really good guide by Thoughtbot. That I think if you search something along the lines of like reading an explain plan, I'd highly recommend that one as a starting point for people. And Depez has written a whole series on explaining the unexplainable. I think is something like that. All of these guides have the same name basically. But yeah, we found that we were still coming across new terms that we couldn't Google search. Yeah, this is the one.
And there was a nice talk by Stephen Frost, I believe, about explain for newcomers or something like this.
Yeah, but Nick's right that it takes an hour to watch one of these talks or to read a few of these guides, and even then, the chances of you coming across the thing you need to look out for, the thing that's causing you the problem right now, is really small because it's such a deep topic. Like every time you scratch the surface of one thing, there's like 5 things behind it. So I think a lot of people end up learning this by hitting problems over and over again, which means it's really hard for beginners or people that only have this problem twice a year to get the hang of. And most teams end up relying on 1 or 2 people within the team, or bigger organizations, maybe it's a team that everybody goes to because they're the only people that know how this works.
Experts.
I may add actually even more in PostgreSQL consulting company, which I work for example, as in any PostgreSQL consulting company, there are a couple of people who really can do this. Others usually try to consult them in the corner cases. So basically, even among the professionals, it's hard stuff.
Yeah. So on that guide, not only did we do the operations, but we wanted to do every field that could come back from each operation as well. So the idea is, if maybe not as a guide, maybe not as a reference, but if somebody doesn't know what heap fetches means, they can Google. Like, the idea was to be able to have, when I don't know what something means, I tend to Google it. And the results, it was not always, you didn't always get a good definition of what it was and what it could mean. So that was what we were trying
to, and what to do, right?
And exactly what the options are.
Right. So you with pgMustard, you're trying to solve this problem, right? So you're trying to explain plan, right? Explain what to do with what you see in explain plan, or how do you describe it?
Yeah, well, we've ended up realizing that so I think it's mostly about saving time. Most of the time when you have if you have a performance problem, your 2 outcomes are either you fix it, either you make it fast, or you give up, I guess. And we were seeing people mostly solving their problems. It took them ages. So either they spent a long time themselves, or they had to ask on a mailing list, or either there was like a few days delay while somebody got back to them, or a few hours looking into it. And often they did get to the solution. So it wasn't so much that we'd help them get to the solution. It was more that we could help them get there on their own and faster and learn in the process. So I'm on the Postgres IRC, and the people on there are incredibly helpful, helping each other out, helping newcomers look into explain plans. But there's very often not an explanation as to why or how they worked that out or why that was a problem. So people will say, add this index, and it'll be, 3-column index in a specific order. And the person doing it is like, great, that made it really fast. But did they learn why that worked, or would they be able to do it again by themselves? That's the kind of thing we were trying to do. So
it looked like a standard task in calculus course or something like this. So differential equations are theoretically simple. Many students need to fight with them, and there are people who can and who wouldn't. Yeah, it's always the same stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you mind if I share screen and show it? Like, at least one screenshot I have on the.
Go for
or
it.
You can. Okay. So this is how it looks, right? I have only screenshot here. We can try to log in and so on. So you decided not to pay attention to graphical stuff. I mean, some people, like, for example, explain Depeche.com uses colorful table to highlight, like, red it means bad and so on, right? Like color to attract attention. Some other tools use like width or like height for something, like geometric approach to highlight where the main problem is. You decided to assign some scores, right? So if like five scores means the most interesting point, most interesting node to start with, thinking how to optimize it, right? Like the biggest potential, right?
The best candidate, yeah.
Right. So, and on the left you describe what is happening and maybe like what to do, right? Here. Like.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Yeah, connection is breaking up. Maybe mine this time. I'm not sure.
Actually, I can see you quite good.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Can
Um,
you repeat, please?
no, so there's a few things. I'm happy to show it as well, but the width here, the top's quite probably the thing that is
Here.
not immediately obvious. That's yeah. So
Mhm.
that is the timing breakdown from the slowest operation to the quickest. So
Mhm.
should quickly give you an idea. The idea here is that two of the operations are dominant.
Like distribution of time, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that sometimes you don't get tips. Sometimes it's but it's still something interesting in that distribution. So that I think we're not trying to hide that information. That it's quite. I find it still really valuable to go straight to the slowest operation or the biggest or the most expensive, however you want to define it. The tips we originally did without scoring. So we'd take the things that we had calculated to have the highest chance of, or the highest potential for saving time, is effectively what they are. And then we added scoring to help people differentiate between like where should I start, and also maybe like how much could I expect this to make a difference. If it's 1.1, maybe it's not going to make a big amount of difference. If it's 5.0, there's a much better chance that you might be in the territory of being able to get orders of magnitude better performance.
Right. So okay. And you use time as the main metric, right? You don't you mentioned rows, but you don't focus on buffers. You know this topic. I'm always trying to convince everyone that buffers is the main thing you should look at. It's not like, I know I'm still in minority maybe, but I'm still thinking it's the best thing you can do with explain plan. Focus on buffers, or at least at rows. It depends on your setup. But if you took the plan from production, my idea is you should focus on buffers. So you don't process them here, right?
Yeah, so we do process buffers,
Okay.
so I think I agree with you more than you think. I do think buffers are really important, and I think that this is probably the main point of this conversation, is that query optimization is more about efficiency normally than about speed. You can get a fast query without it being very efficient, but the easiest way is to focus on efficiency. And a big part of efficiency is looking at reads and the amount of work being done. And so that
looking at fewer pages or buffers, or how you call it, to process less data.
yes.
And all indexes are all about this, right? So
Yes.
We want to process less as possible, as few buffers as possible. And timing is too volatile. So you repeat the query at different timing. Depends on various parameters. Buffers are less volatile.
Yes. So this is where I think I have a slightly different opinion in the,
okay.
But I still agree that if you have to choose one, if you can only have buffers or timing, I could see an argument for picking buffers. But most of the time we don't have to, in our case, people are ad hoc getting these query plans and they can get both.
And why they don't have buffers? Because it's off by default. That's why.
So, and this is where I think I'd like you to be, listen to a little bit. It would be awesome if buffers were on by default. If you include,
I should advertise here that Vic Fearing, like last year we talked about it as well, and like almost 1 year ago at PGCon actually. By the way, he recently became officially a major contributor. Congratulations. So he proposed a patch, but it's still underestimated. Like buffers should be on by default. There is a thread in Hackers. If people who watch us can have some agree with me, please go and add your opinion to Hackers mailing list, saying that buffers is a good thing to have by default, right? So a small advertisement. Okay, so you're saying that most of the time people don't bring you buffers. That's why you need to focus on time. No?
No, probably about 95. So we ask for it. Luckily, we have the in the beginning, we can ask for people are normally running the explain analyze before after they come to us. So it's we in fact ask for analyze, verbose, buffers, and we format JSON. And
I have another question. Okay,
yeah.
I have another question to ask about format. Okay, but later.
Okay. So yeah, in fact, I think it's about 95% of the time we do get buffers. At the moment, we display rows, and I think it's really important to I think people conceptually think in terms of timing and think in terms of I have a slow query and I want it to be faster. So the more we can speak that language of here's where the time is going, I think that helps people. I understand that there's volatility, especially I think mostly on systems that have slow system clock, maybe virtualized environments. I think in a lot of other systems, it's much less than people fear. But I think that was I think it was Ongress, wasn't it, who publicized.
Right. So you're talking about overhead of measuring time for each node in the explain plan. Yeah, well, there is overhead, definitely.
Yeah.
Always. Well, there is always overhead.
And volatility, you're right. It's not just from the overhead, but also from you run it 10 times, then it can come back differently 10 times, whereas buffers will be the same, or at least same number.
If disk is involved, it will be very volatile.
Yeah. But the total will be the same, even if it's split differently between.
No. Buffers will be the same. Timing will be not the same.
Yeah, so I meant buffers. Yeah.
Well, for total, it's slightly more complicated than it looks like, because usually you read a buffer one time, but you might hit it multiple times. And here we have a problem. We cannot distinguish. If we have 1,000 hits, it may be a single hit of 1,000 buffers, versus it may be also only 100 buffers and each one was hit 10 times. So it's from current explain data, you cannot understand it. And so if you have very, very small shared buffers, maybe you'll be reading it many times. It's kind of, you cannot just get hits and reads and sum them and say this is our data. It's not, actually you can, because it's also interesting. By the way, I also was curious. For example, we see like 1,000 hits. Can we directly translate them to bytes, multiplying by buffer size? Normally it's 8 kilobytes. Can we do it or no? What do you think?
I was going to ask you the same question, actually. Well, change that number. Do people change the default?
No. I think it's not, it doesn't matter. We can use this setting. We can get from Postgres. We can get the setting and understand the block size. I'm asking, like, for example, I mentioned like we can hit the same buffer many times, right? Maybe we hit 1,000 times only one buffer. It also, like, it's very edge case, but it's also theoretically possible. Can we say like, okay, we have 1,000 hits. Can we say it's 8 megabytes, because you need to multiply it by buffer size? Can we translate it to bytes, those hits, or no?
My opinion?
Yes.
I think it's useful to, because in the mind of the person doing the work, it's trying to understand what took so long. And the idea that once you tell them that it read 20 gigabytes of data, even if it's the same 8 kilobytes over and over again, the fact that it read 20 gigabytes.
Yeah, it still was read, right? So we still, even if we read the same small piece, we read it many times, we still we have some flow, stream of data reading hitting here. So right. Yeah, I agree with you here, but it's still like kind of a little bit tricky to understand. But I've noticed, like, from my experience, that developers pay much more attention when you talk about gigabytes, or about bytes versus buffers. It's easier to understand to like wider audience. Like, you don't need to translate it to get a feeling how many data it is, Right. Okay. Interesting. So, okay. But still timing is the main number one. Like, okay. And overhead, it depends on the system, on the system, right? So are you working, like, is it possible to use pgMustard for the plans obtained by auto-explain? Right.
Yes.
It's possible. Yeah.
Big caveat if they're in JSON format.
Right. So you need JSON format. Right. Right. Okay. Good. So it means that theoretically it could be possible, like it could be possible to feed constantly. You thought about it, right? Like, what do you think? So like you have library and see everything already. Like you don't need to copy paste anything, right? If you have.
I mean, so we're a team of 2. That's our main constraint.
Yeah. Right.
There's a lot of things we'd love to do. In fact, even we picked this topic because we thought it was narrow and deep. We thought it was a really good fit for a small team, and you can definitely go broader. But we've had enough. We've had so much to do just going deeper that we haven't got to that basically. But I think you introduced me to this phrase in one of your talks. You talked about macro analysis and micro analysis. So macro being kind of system level, looking at monitoring and looking for system-wide changes, and then micro analysis looking at, like, once you've worked out which query is slow, how do we make it fast, or how do we make it more efficient? And we've stuck with being a micro analysis tool, and I think there's a ton of work that can be done to help you bridge that gap and go from macro to micro more easily. And one of those options is we thought it'd be really cool if you could automatically log your slowest queries, send them to auto-explain, get those sent to pgMustard, and maybe then we apply the scoring and tell you what not just what your 5 slowest queries are, but what the ones that actually have the highest potential for. So some combination of slow and suboptimal, or slow and potential for increase.
Right. Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah. Well, okay. Is it like, okay, you mentioned that like your team of 2. Can you like describe some plans you have right now, or what are you working right now?
Yeah. So a big thing we're working on almost constantly in the background is improving the existing tips. So the scoring and making them clearer. We try not to be too prescriptive with exactly. So in fact, we haven't covered, I guess, many of the different issues people can hit, but a common one is if there's a filter, a big filter on a scan, we'll say that there's index potential, but we won't say add this index. Or so I think a lot of them we could give a variety of advice for. So that's quite a specific one, but one of the ones that I'd love to improve, so as an example, is we give a tip when we think we see signs of table bloat or index bloat. So a lot.
I saw it. Yeah, it's interesting. So you from micro analysis, from analysis of just a single query, you can draw a conclusion that there are signs that it's bloated, right? Because you're basically, like, I guess you are hitting or reading too many buffers than expected, right? Right. Okay.
But I would love to improve that tip to factor in other reasons why you might be hitting a lot of buffers. So reading a lot of data to return very little is like that efficiency play that we talked about, and it would be I think we could probably improve the clarity of that tip. So if instead of we said signs of bloat, but it could be other things, it would be good to say lots of data read for the amount returned, or something like that. And then within the tip, we could say check for bloat, then do this, then do that type advice. So improving the existing tips.
Migrate to Postgres 13 and rebuild indexes to have deduplication, right?
Always upgrade.
Right.
But yeah, so improving existing tips is like always on in the background. And then the main big thing we're working on is sharing of plans. So we took the decision really early on to keep plans So we do send them to our server, but we don't store them. Then when we pass them back, they go into local storage in the browser. But sometimes people want to share them still, either with a colleague, like in a PR, to show them the result, or
like collaboration tool, right? So
yeah,
not individual tool, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Makes sense. Yeah, it's good. And do you think like you will have a feature to publish plan, like to public, to maybe to go and ask in some public channel like chat or forum or something? Also,
yeah. So when we work on features, we try and do like the smallest version of them possible to start with, and it turns out that publishing openly is the smallest version of this that is most useful. So that's, at first, that will be the only option. So it will only be suitable for teams that are okay with it going to the open internet.
Right. Also, like going back to how people obtain this data that copy paste to your tool. We talked maybe some time ago, we talked about the idea of maybe like to sending directly from pSQL. We have like a colleague of mine developed some very small, tiny tool, but it got interesting attraction. Like you can, using some trick, you can send it from pSQL. But I have strong opinion also that having just explain is not enough, right? You need to, if, for example, you ask some expert who is not 100% familiar with your database, you also need to provide schema, current schema, right? Set of indexes, show me your how your table, how your create table looks like. And maybe even additionally, maybe even some knowledge about statistics currently present in database, right? Did you have any ideas that it would be useful also to collect such information and store it also like next to explain plans?
Yeah. It's surprising how much you can do with explain and carefully worded advice. So indexes, for example, it's really useful to know what indexes they have so that you can tell the difference between saying it's not using the existing index you have here because that it's a function, or like that there's some reason it can't use the index you expect it to be able to use, versus there's no index on that column at all, for example. But if you word the advice in a way that you say, either look into why it's not using an existing index or consider adding one, you can, that added context doesn't necessarily, it adds a big hurdle to using the product, I think, without adding as much benefit as we thought it would. So at first, we thought that kind of stuff would be vital, but as we've progressed, it's turned out to be less. So it was really useful. It hasn't stopped us being able to point people in the right direction. And normally that's not the problem. Normally people just need, the most valuable thing is realizing it's not using the index in the first place.
Right. That's also...
Yeah, we got an interesting question actually, which can be extended to another interesting question. So there is a question. Then experts often run the query. They use like hints, like enable sequential scan, enable that and this.
It's just hints. It's like more settings.
Like hints.
Hints
I actually personally don't like to hint like this, but is it like more often to do this? And do you have any ideas how to use such stuff for pgMustard?
Like saying that you need to decrease your random page cost, for example, to 1.1,
or just ask if you set such
set scan to off, or set index scan to off, or something like this.
And how actually pgMustard behave itself in this regard? So that basically someone just posted an explain, but before that, a person actually disabled sequential scan or something like this. What will be going on with pgMustard in this case?
Yeah, so it doesn't impact us much. I think I think the root of this kind of thing tends to be row estimations. So if you're in my experience, at least, you two probably know better than me, but if or even an amount of data. So I've seen people use so when you turn like a sequential scan off, I think what you're doing is multiplying one of the numbers behind the scenes of how expensive Postgres the planner thinks each sequential read is going to be. So it's more likely to pick an index, and it makes it almost impossible that it's going to pick a sequential scan. But then in pgMustard, what you'll end up seeing is probably an inefficient index. So you might end up if you end up with them. Well, maybe you end up seeing an efficient index. Like I think it's
It brings us to the topic of like I also wanted to a little bit touch during this conference we had this week. There was interesting topic about adaptive query optimizer. I think you know, right? And Andrei Lepikov, right? And he mentioned that we discussed, like some time ago, we discussed that it would be good if Postgres returned not only the plan it chose, but also some candidate plans, right? And as I'm not sure, but I've heard rumors that MongoDB does it. Like it returns multiple plans and says this was chosen. I'm not sure, but it would be good to have. And it looks like they in Postgres Pro they solved it. If you use this extension for query optimizer, is it extension or it's a fork? I'm not sure. I'm going to try it because it's being developed and it's interesting. It's like adaptive query optimizer to teach the planner to change behavior based on what we see currently, on the behavior we see currently, right? If we see it has some mistakes, maybe we need to fix it. Like we have feedback loop, right? So it's like machine learning stuff. So it would be like, I remember multiple times in my experience that sometimes I'm very curious why some index was not used. So for example, I see, okay, sequential scan was chosen. What if I disable it and see the cost of using index scan? Okay, I see it's bigger than sequential scan. It gives me better understanding what is happening, right? So using these knobs to turn on and off various. Actually, it's not turning on and off. It's PCMizing them, right? Or how is it called? Like when you say enable sec scan off, you actually put some huge extra cost to it. So it still can be chosen, but you added some extra cost to it, right?
Actually, a person who asked this question add something to that. So basically, the idea was if pgMustard can enable this feature, like you show and explain, then you have some checkbox like disable sequential scan, and you can see what is going on. So the idea was that many experts actually use those hints just to figure out if the plan is correct or not, and so on. So basically.
Well, okay, you want to see a set of plans and understand how the best was chosen. This is a very close question. My understanding, like you want to see the set of plans and see, okay, this was chosen, but we had alternatives, and we see why they lost this competition.
But I'm afraid that's difficult to do with pgMustard, because pgMustard analyzes only explain.
It's not connected to database.
Yeah.
Well, even more, it's only explain, analyze, and I think the place I see costs being most useful. Well, there's two people I think find costs really useful. One is if you're working on the optimizer itself and you're trying to debug a time where it's picked a plan that turned out to be suboptimal, which is a small proportion of the time, or if you can't get the analyze, if it's a query that was running indefinitely and you want to have a look at the explain but without the analyze.
Yes.
In practice, we don't do much with the cost at all. I'm not sure we use the costs for any tips, because I know this could be us missing a trick, but at the moment so far we've got to where we are without them, because I think the way I see it is they're a really good proxy for like how expensive something is. But once you've got the actual information, once you've got the timing and the buffers, you're better to rely on the actual numbers rather than what Postgres thought would be the case based on.
Right, but as I remember when I tried your tool, you compare planned rows and actual rows.
Yeah.
So you still use some planner information, right?
Yeah, sorry, really good point.
Yeah, if you see a big difference, you say something not good happening here. Maybe you need to run recalculate statistics with analyze command, and so on, right? So I get your point that you don't use cost. Okay.
We also, we use another estimated number. I think width is estimated as well. I'm not 100% sure. And we use that.
It's estimated, of course. It's not calculated, right?
But you never find out, even in the analyze, I don't think you get an actual width. Maybe you do.
I don't think so.
No,
I don't think so.
I actually a slightly off-topic question. So basically, then someone posts explain analyze to pgMustard. You don't know the version of Postgres which generated this explain. Did you try to check that specifically if that could be a huge difference without knowing the version or not? Theoretically, it should be.
Well, it depends. So I think most of the tips are independent of version. There's one that comes to mind that before version 12, a CTE scan that only gets referenced once in the query is an optimization fence. It can't be optimized. The planner can't take it into account while it's choosing the plan. So if you see that happening, you know it's before 12, and you can give that tip and say, you can say this, either inline this query or consider upgrading. But if you inline it, maybe you get a performance boost, maybe not, but it's worth trying. So that in that case, you know it's pre-version 12. I think there's maybe exceptions. I think maybe
if you see parallel workers, you definitely know it's not very old, like not 6.
Yeah, and I think
9.5, for example, not 9.5.
Well, and I think JSON was only 9.0 or something. So like, so there's like a few giveaway things, and JIT and settings give it away as well. WoW gives write-ahead log information gives it away. But the main point is most of the things that we look for are age-old problems: missing index, bad row estimate, poor cache performance. In practice, I guess this is my main point. In practice, the issues we see in the real world are not as often related to the planner being mistaken or having an issue with it. It's much more like these other category of reasons that your query might be slower than you want. And that's the main thing I think I've learned over the years. It's been kind of, it's subjective. One person's good plan is another person's bad plan, but some of these truths stay true to whole. Like missing index is probably going to be an issue for everybody.
Right. Makes sense. And so
yeah,
okay,
we basically have only a few minutes for something like last question or something like this.
Right. Yeah. Okay. We have advice. Okay, to use IRC channel as a source of good experience with working with plans.
And as I mentioned in the chat, we already talked about this in the beginning.
Right.
IRC is really good source.
Right. So okay, and yeah, it's very interesting, and I would like to. I have maybe one of last questions. I have a question which is not more like, it's not technical. Did you consider making it open source? And yes. Why did you choose not to?
Yeah, I think this is like a big choice especially coming into the Postgres ecosystem. we felt like we wanted to make a business, and I know that doesn't rule out open source. But the main things we thought we were building that were of any value were the UI, so the design and how it looked, and the algorithm for scoring these tips. And if they're the main differentiator, and they're open source, that's a problem for us, I guess. That it would be extremely easy for the major platforms, let's say. Well, I guess maybe at the time we hadn't seen people like Timescale really like and Elastic and people looking at licenses that would prevent other people hosting their service. So maybe that if we took that decision today, it might be different. But yeah,
but
at the
they
time,
they are not open source in strict meaning because they don't use OCI approved license. And so if you use one of any OCI approved licenses, you are like your code
second
can be used
class
by
open source.
no. If you use OCI, you like first class open source.
If you
But
use,
yeah, but cloud platforms, they can take it and earn money much more than you, right? Because they have more users. So it's like a big discussion also. Right. Okay. So makes sense. So any chances you will change your mind maybe like in the future? What do you think?
Always there's a chance, right? But I
Yeah,
think it's
you
unlikely. We want to make a product that doesn't need people never need to contact us for support. It just works, and they don't need professional services around it. That's the ideal product for us to build, and I think it would be very difficult to make a living running it if we didn't charge money for it. So it's a really difficult one, I think, for us to work out. How do you work full time on this and earn a living from it if you don't provide support services or so yeah, naturally we do provide support services, but I think if we were incentivized to, if that was the way we made money, I think we'd probably end up making a less good product, if that makes sense.
Yeah, perfectly fine from my point of view.
Yeah, and like the cost is not that high, like 95 euros per year for single user license, and there are other options as well for bigger teams than one a single user. So it's kind of like everyone can afford it, like few cups of coffee, several cups of coffee, and that's it.
So yeah, that's a good point actually. For commercial, we think it's cheap, and something that we haven't publicized on there yet on the pricing is that if you're a student or if anybody's watching that wants to use this for non-commercial use, just contact me.
Yeah, so you can provide it for free for some classes of people who. Okay, it's good point. Good. Yeah. And, anyway, it's like as I've said, like it's 2 cups per month of coffee, right? It's a very affordable price. So, and it looks like it's doing a great job for people who are like who need to solve problem faster than reading everything and understanding everything. Of course, we encourage everyone to understand and learn constantly, right? But as I mentioned, this tool also encourages you to learn more. You have links to documentation and so on. Also, good thing. Right? Good. Okay. Good. I think we had a good chat. Let's see if we have something in YouTube chat additionally. Yeah, like, okay, it's discussing the same topic. Okay, thank you, Michael. Maybe you have questions also. We can discuss like a couple of minutes and anything if you want, or
Yeah,
otherwise.
I'd love to hear. I mean, if we've got a minute, I'd love to hear what you see people doing in the real world, like kind of your customers, I guess. How you see them doing this.
There are many different types of people, right? So some of them are have very deep knowledge, like very really deep knowledge, or just learn fast and get this knowledge quick. fast, very fast. But some of them don't have time, and they just ask others. I think what you mentioned, like this collaboration tool, is think like very good. Should be good thing. Maybe we even in some future with some like communication features, like highlighting problems and make some comment and so on. So people are behaving very differently, very differently.
And I would say
So-
actually sometimes such a tool could be very useful for a sort of like daily report from statements or something like this. So basically integrate it into some monitoring system, so some plugin for some monitoring or something like this.
Or to some graphical user interface, like we mentioned PostgreSQL. There are many other tools right now, and usually written in Java. So they have plugins system sometimes. So maybe you could also, it could be also maybe a good channel. I'm not sure. So I also wanted to mention here some, like we also try to do something like with our job bot. We try to do something, right, like recommendations. So we still have them very basic, like awfully basic. So I remember I saw several times, like we put a device, like also like we see like heap fetches here. Consider running vacuum analyze to recalculate the visibility maps and get rid of those heap fetches. So what I saw several times people do, they run it just vacuum analyze. And since we forgot to mention vacuum analyze table name, they run it on the whole database. And in a sandbox environment. And it takes ages if database is huge. So we need to fix it. So it's a kind of advices is hard job.
Welcome to my world.
Yes, yes.
Oh, I
So-
can guess. How many actually like feedback requests do you get a day about like this advice should be like improved, or people like advices?
Honestly, we don't hear from people enough. I
Okay.
probably only hear from people a couple of times a week. Most
Mm.
people don't ever contact us. So if you use it and have any qualms at all, we love hearing that kind of thing.
Mm.
I think it can be improved using interfaces, because I also notice sometimes people have awful problems, but they don't notice like intercom chat in the corner somehow. I don't know how. So it can be still like there's always room for improvement in terms of interface and get feedback from them, right? Maybe you could create some button like I had success, or I'm not satisfied with result, like, and then you can start talking. Okay, we start brainstorming ideas. We can do it
Yeah.
separately of like.
Well, thank you.
It was an interesting talk. Thank you for coming. It was very nice.
Yeah,
Thank you
thank
both
you.
for having me.
Really listening. Let's keep in touch, and I hope everyone also enjoyed it, and I encourage you to consider pgMustard, and also I'm going to post all links we mentioned to articles to the description after we end this call. Please consider subscribing and liking as usual, or disliking, I don't know, and commenting. So thank you, Michael. Have a good one.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
both. Likewise.
Thank you.